We are looking at the theory of realism in international relations in this video. It's important to understand that international relations is an aspect of political science, but over the last several decades, it has assumed its own life, so to speak. Very respected area of study, of research, and countries actually play this out. They study international relations so that they can know how to interact with other countries on the global stage. It has given us a perspective and a context as to how countries deal with other countries on the global stage. All right, so let's begin by taking a look at the theory itself, its foundation, and then we can talk about the different aspects of the theory. Now, it says here, the theory of realism, right? The theory of realism in international relations is one of the dominant schools of thought in international relations. There are many schools of thought in international relations. Liberalism, for example, is another dominant school of thought, right? It deals with early modern Europe within the context of real politic statesmanship. The thrust of this theory, and this is the important part here, right? The thrust of this theory is that there will always be conflict. Now take note of this, always be conflict in world politics among state actors who are pursuing wealth and power. That's the thrust, and that's the thrust of this theory, that there will always be conflict in world politics. And why is that? Because countries look after their national interest, right? They look after their national interest. And one country's national interest may not align with another country's national interest. And because there is no alignment, sometimes it causes friction, tension, and sometimes war. And this is the reality of realism in international relations. Now let's take a look at this again, because this is a very important point, and this is actually the foundation of this theory. All right, so it says here, the thrust of this theory is that there will always be conflict in world politics among states who are pursuing wealth and power. They pursue power, right? Wealth in terms of natural resources, in terms of economics, in terms of trade, and so forth. Power in terms of political power, in terms of economic power, in terms of military power, in terms of cultural, social, and religious power, right? The list is long. States pursue this because they want to achieve hegemony, right? And this term is a very important one, hegemony, right? It means control, it means dominance. And states want to achieve hegemony because they want to dominate their neighbors, they want to dominate their sub-region, they want to dominate the world, etc. Right, and this is why it's important for us to understand this, that there will always be conflict in the world when we talk about nation states. Just like children in a household and the children growing up, there's always going to be conflict and disagreements and fights over toys and over who did this and who did that and so forth. That's how countries are. They are always going to be at loggerheads. They may be at peace at one point, but at another point they may be at loggerheads. The opposite theory of realism is liberalism, which canvasses cooperation among nation states in international relations, right? So liberalism is the opposite of realism. Liberalism says, wait a minute, we need to cooperate, right? There's no need for war. There's no need for tension. There's no need for friction. We need to cooperate amongst ourselves as nation states in the global community. All right, so there are three categories of realism, right? And this is very, very important information, very important to know. Three categories of realism based on how they see the root causes of nation-states conflict, right? Nation-states will always be in conflict. And this is a very, very important point. Please take note of this point. Nation-states will always be in conflict because that's their nature, that's the way they are, and there's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing anyone can do about this. Now, what we can do about this is to study it and understand why nations are going to war. It's just like a lion will attack another animal because that's its nature, right? We don't ask the question, why is the lion attacking the gazelle or attacking the deer or attacking other animals? That is its nature, right? Now, what we can do is to study why it's doing that and to better understand the character of the lion. And that's how nation states are. They will get into conflict. What we can do now is to understand why they get into conflict and how that conflict can be avoided. Now, there are three categories of realists based on how they see the root causes of nation-state conflict. The first one is classical realists. They believe that that conflict is inherent. Inherent here means natural, that is inherent and part of human nature. Nothing can be done about this. It is part of human nature, and that's how human beings are. And that's the way it is. That's the way it is. There's nothing anyone can do about this. That is their position. Classical realists believe that conflict is inevitable. Let's put that here. Inevitable. It cannot be avoided. That's what it means. Inevitable. Cannot be avoided. And that all we can do is to prepare for it. Right? To prepare for it. So it's inherent and part of human nature. The second category of realists are Neorealists, who believe that it is a result, it being war and conflict, is a result of the dynamics of the anarchic state system. Right? So they are saying that anarchy reigns amongst states, and conflict is just a result of that anarchy. That's what it's saying. So Neorealists believe that anarchy reigns, and because it reigns, well, nation states will get into war. They will get into conflict. They will get into disagreement, because that is the nature of our states. Chaotic, there's anarchy in society, and because of this fact, nation states will go to war. All right, so then the third category, right? The third category is Neoclassical. We believe that we believe that war is a result from both, right, classical and Neorealist, in combination with domestic politics. Domestic politics plays a role. It could be maybe opposition. It could be maybe during elections and so forth. Plays a role. That nation states are at loggerheads with one another because of these positions. The classical realist position, which is inherently and part of human nature, and Neorealist position, which believes that nation states are in a chaotic state, and because they're in a chaotic state, there's always going to be war. And of course, the Neoclassical believe that the combination of the two, the first two, right, will result into anarchy, will result into war and conflicts and so forth. This is realism. This is the theory of realism in international relations, suggesting that nations are always going to interact with each other, sometimes not on a friendly level, because they have national interest, because they seek hegemony, and because they seek wealth and power. And because of these factors, there's always going to be war. So this is realism, a very important theory in international relations. And countries play it out all the time. The superpowers play it out all the time. The United States, for example, invading Grenada and Panama and abducting its leader. That's a good example of realism. Iran versus Iraq, the war that lasted 8 years, another example of realism. The war against Kuwait, Iraq versus Kuwait, that's another example of realism. We have many examples of realism. Russia versus Ukraine, it's another example of realism as well. So this is a very important theory in international relations. And it's important for us to understand it and put it in context and understand the different categories of realists, the classical realist, the neo-realist, and the neoclassical realist. It's important to understand their positions. This is realism.